Bring in Mary Anne.
Hey, Ben.
Hey.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, let me actually. So, I think some people will know who you are because they will also listen to our friend David Feldman, but
Yeah.
other people might not. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Mary Anne Cummings. I live in Aurora, Illinois. I was a Bernie delegate both in 16 and in 20. And after the debacle, which I thought was the convention of 2016, Bernie had us all in a big meeting a month later and told everybody to run for office. And Bernie stands out as the candidate that is always asking people to do harder and harder things. He does not make it easy for people who are serious about it, never. So he told us all to run for public office, and I did. There was an opportunity. The Park District had a board that had been appointed by the various counties, and now that because it's a taxing body, in fact, I identified on my last property tax bill 2 items from the Park District. So, no taxation with representation, and all that. They changed the law, and I ran. I was among the first people that it's a huge park district, so there's 3 separate sub-districts, and I'm in the second one, which is the poorest one, which is Old Aurora, which has a lot of problems and the most underserved. So that's that's my kind of local introduction into politics, apart from being kind of political since I watched the adults elect Richard Nixon, which I've never recovered from.
Yeah, fair enough. So was obviously not born yet, but I will say the earliest political conversation I can remember ever having was when I would have been 4 years old, because it would have been the morning after the 1984 election. And I remember coming downstairs, my dad was reading the newspaper, and I must have understood enough as a 4-year-old about elections to know someone won and someone lost, because I said who won, and I can still remember he just had this look of anger and disgust and contempt, and he just spat out the word Reagan. But yeah, fair enough. So moving from Nixon and
to Reagan, to those debacles, to the Democrats not being up to the task then and the present.
Yeah, right. So obviously, Biden winning is hugely, Biden winning the Democratic nomination is hugely disappointing, and I think one of the things that we all feel, disappointed about, those of us who campaigned for Bernie and did all that, is that it seems like over the last 5 years, Medicare for All has felt like it's more on the agenda than it's ever been before, or certainly in a long time. And then there was even a point in 2018 when some centrist Democrats, people like Kamala Harris, were briefly pretending to support it.
Yes.
So it seemed like there was some momentum there. And then of course, if Bernie had been president, then he would have used the presidential bully pulpit to push it, in whatever way that he could. So I think we're all very frustrated that that's not the situation that we're in. That that Biden is going to be president. There's probably going to be a Republican Senate, but even if there weren't, whatever. I mean, it's not like it's not like the Democratic leadership in the House or the Senate supports it, and Biden said as a candidate that he would veto it. And so this is how the force to vote controversy comes up, because I think some people see a real opening there to move the needle forward, and others of us are more skeptical. So do you want to just kind of start out?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to comment on something you said just a couple of minutes ago. The ball on Medicare for All has not moved forward within DC circles. Okay.
Right.
There was a big article in The Intercept about a year ago. I can't remember. I think it was Ryan Grimm, because he usually reports on this kind of stuff, where aides to Nancy Pelosi were reassuring all the Democratic donors and the insurance companies that there was going to be no possibility of Medicare for all. So, you know, the ball will never move forward inside of those circles through normal give and take negotiated paths. It has to be forced. And I'm looking at two things. One, you know, I hear the comment about, well, there has to be activism. I said, you know, I remember almost 2 decades ago being downtown Chicago, listening to, who was it, John Conyers, talking about Medicare for all, talking about single payer. That was House, I think he was just introducing House Resolutions 676 way back in the day. And there seemed to be a big buildup. Quentin Young, who was a very iconic doctor, political figure in the Chicago area, doctor to Martin Luther King when he was over in the Chicago area with the Poor People's March. People forget that. Martin Luther King was organizing marches of poor people where there were busloads of poor Appalachian people coming to Chicago. So he came from that perspective. So we had all of the big icons there. And there seemed to be a big move, nurses and doctors, and that was like years and years ago. Now we are to the point. We have done the activism because 70% of the country, and depending on the polls you read, but the Fox News poll had 72% of the country for Medicare for all. Now that's only going to increase, because even if, and it's a little dicey when the herd immunity is going to kick in from vaccines, but even when that happens, we're just beginning to see the economic fallout. So more and more people are going to be, Naomi Klein, what was that? She coined the phrase evicted from the ownership class. There's going to be a lot of people evicted from the class they think they belong to now, which is the comfortable middle class. We've got health care. We've got ours. We don't want to lose it. So I think that we've done, mission accomplished. I mean, the activism has worked. And so what has frustrated me and our friend Matt Stoller, I don't know if he's your friend, somebody I know, but he has commented, like, for the last 2 years, that there doesn't seem to be any real strategizing on the part of the squad, that the people that we're calling the squad, and they definitely need to. So how I'm kind of embroiled locally in this squabble is that 2 days after, 2 days after the election, I was on David Feldman's show, and I was on right next to Alan Minsky, and Alan was talking about, because he's following all these races, like, wow, Nancy Pelosi could be in real trouble here. Like, she could be within 2 seats of losing her speakership. Yeah, because there were so many races that were that close. It turns out that number seems to be 222 right now. Because that New York race ain't going to be resolved anytime soon. But then it just struck me like, holy crap, doing the math, 218. It's like, my God, that means the squad, who doubled their numbers ostensibly that night, have reached the ability that I've been arguing with my Green Party friends ever since graduate school. I said, okay, you guys have to run somebody for president. Why the hell not put a fraction of that energy and money in every off cycle to have a 10-year plan to get at least 5 to 10 seats in the House? Then you can start voting as a block. You're not going to get everything you want, but you pick out 2 or 3 really critical, like in the Green Party case, environmental issues. And then you just tell the Democrats that you don't get any of our votes unless, our demands are, and then you start negotiating. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, my God, the squad did this in 2 election cycles. There we are. So maybe they are in a position to, and it could be, to me, it was not only just Medicare for all, but all Green New Deal, a whole spectrum of things. So about 3 weeks later, I did listen to Jimmy Dore's show, and he mentioned that. Now, somebody said he'd been mentioning it before, but that was the first time I heard it from Jimmy Dore. And I said, fantastic. Why don't they do this? They have, and by the way, this is real power, whether or not you agree with it. Whenever I hear people say, well, they don't have the number, they never have the numbers. Bernie Sanders didn't have the numbers. At the beginning of December, the Democratic leadership was willing to make a deal with Republican leadership that included no direct payments. He decided to change the narrative by using the power he had, which was, individual senators can hold up the works, and he did. So, you don't go, people have this calculus, they think in terms of, we're going to do this thing, but it's not really going to change anything else. So we're going to do the calculus, if we do this thing and nothing else changes, we won't get what I want. And I think this is beat down dog mentality that the left has had for way too long.
Okay, so let's get into some of that. I think the Bernie stimulus, survival payments analogy is a good one for thinking about this, because I think that a big part of our disagreement about this is I don't think it's true that we've done the activism thing in any sort of mission accomplished sense. I think that there's been lots of activism, but I think the mission is very, 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 very far from.
What do you want to wait for, Ben? 70% agree with us.
Yes, I understand that. I let you talk for a long time. So yeah, I think it's very far from accomplished. I think it's accomplished a lot. I think that it's gotten us for the point where, Conyers introduced that, and there were a couple dozen co-sponsors, to a point where it's been where in the last few years it's been at the center of debates in the Democratic Party. And it has 118 co-sponsors, which is massive progress, no doubt about that. Even though, as you say, the Democratic leadership is still intransigently opposed to it, that hasn't changed, and I think isn't going to change. As long as that's the leadership. That's how they're going to feel. Totally agreed on that. So I think that a couple of differences that I see between the two situations are one. That when Sanders insists that we need to have the $2,000 checks, I think that that's a situation where Trump has said the same things at certain points. So you could even get a bunch of Republicans to vote for that, and also we just had checks not very long ago. It's something that I think a lot of people, I think most normal people, think that this is something that might actually happen. They take that seriously. Whereas, and this is a big part of the reason that I don't actually think the mission has been accomplished on the activism, when it comes to those 70%, in some polls, and and I know that a lot changes depending on how you ask the question, but sometimes 70% of the public says that they want Medicare for all. I think that there's a world of difference between having majority, a majority opinion, yeah, that sounds good, I would support it, and having the kind of mobilized constituency that's going to be mad if it doesn't happen and punish politicians at the polls, which seems to be a big part of the premise of Force the Vote. And I think that we're nowhere near that. I think that the way we know we're nowhere near that is because we just lived through an election that I think showed that pretty decisively. In every single one of those Super Tuesday states that Joe Biden won, majority of Democrats in exit polls said that they supported Medicare for all, but instead of, even when the race was down to two people, right? And usually when people on our side say, oh, that it was rigged, whatever, what they mean is they artificially bringing it down to two people. So the race was down to two people. One of them was practically synonymous with Medicare for all. He talked about it so much. And the other one openly said before Bernie dropped out that he would veto it if it passed both houses while he was president. And people still chose the one who said he would veto it. Now, does that mean they don't really like the idea of Medicare for all? No, it doesn't. I think what it does mean, though, is that they're not going to punish politicians for being opposed to it. He won the primary. He then went on to win the general election with far greater Democratic turnout than last time. And you mentioned the Green Party earlier, far lower Green Party, Green Party votes than last time. And yeah, there are a lot of reasons for that. But the point is that at no point in any of this were most voters, or even most voters who tell pollsters that they support Medicare for all, punishing anybody for opposing it. And I think the reason is that there is a night and day difference between being in a position with regard to Medicare for all, where when a pollster calls you up on the phone and says, "Hey, would you support this happening?" You say, "Oh yeah, sure, that sounds great. That sounds wonderful." Which most people are going to. Most people hate their insurance companies, contra a lot of popular mythology on that. And taking it seriously as something that you think might happen, that you think has any kind of chance at all of happening, because I think there's a lot of, among us, the sort of hardcore of the Bernie movement, there's a lot of anger about the fact that Medicare for all isn't going anywhere, which is being channeled, in my view, misdirected in a horrendously counterproductive way by force to vote. But there is a lot of justified anger about that. But the problem is the overwhelming majority of people who might tell a pollster, "Yeah, sure, I'd support that," don't feel that anger. The reason they don't feel that anger, no matter how many horror stories they have about their experience with the medical system, maybe they even lost their health insurance during the pandemic, is because they don't think that it's something that's actually going to happen. It's like the reason that we're not frustrated right now, because there's not going to be many workers control the means of production in the next 5 years, because we don't think that that's something that could happen. They don't think it's something that could happen. So I think our task, and this is where I think the activism, where the organizing, and Jane McAlvey's sense, there's organizing and then there's mobilizing. So you organize, get people behind you, and then you mobilize them later. That so much of the organizing is still ahead of us, as frustrated as it might be, as much as it might seem like, hey, we've been at this forever. That I think that most people, our whole task with regards to this, if we want to achieve Medicare for all, the main thing that we need to do is to get people to take it seriously enough that they'll punish politicians at the polls, that it really would be something that, well, if somebody voted against this, then they're going to be super vulnerable to a primary challenge. Right now, most centrist Democrats are screaming from the rooftops that they're against Medicare for all. There's no equivocation about this. And so I think that the thing that we need is to get people to take it more seriously. And my concern, the reason that I think that the idea, we can talk about the idea itself, take it as a kind of suggested parliamentary maneuver that the squad can do, then we could talk about what's being done to push the idea. But I think the reason the idea itself doesn't make sense to me is because the effect of this, it's not like the symbolic votes that the Tea Party forced that then, Obama vetoed or whatever, because those things all won. They won the House and generally won the Senate before they were vetoed. That's a symbolic victory. This is a symbolic defeat. This would be, there are 118 co-sponsors. Anybody who's still not a co-sponsor after these last years in which it's been pushed that much, I think we know how they feel about Medicare for all. So that would be a 3-1 defeat with no suspense whatsoever, which I think is going to, if anything, deepen the problem of most people who think it sounds like a nice idea, not taking it seriously enough to get mad that it's not happening.
Well, I think what's going to deepen our problem, and I think Nobiki Konst had a good answer for this, and also a good answer as to why Democrats lost in areas where Joe Biden won, is that the Democrats are offering people nothing but weakness. They're offering them nothing, and they look weak. And what's going to deepen our problem is if we go into the 2022 midterms, and it's going to be a crap storm around here. It is going to be so bad for regular people in a way that I suspect a lot of my comfortable tenured friends just really can't imagine at this moment, that the Democrats are going to be slaughtered in 2022 and in 2024. And the people that keep Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and the rest of Dem leadership in power will be happy with this. As I said, I used to talk about, a lot of the things people are working through right now, I would have held maybe 30 years ago. Like I used to even say as a young person, competition among elites. Of course, there's much more cohesiveness among elites, I think, because of the dominance of finance, and they own our politicians. So so there is no power that the squad has inside. They just have us. They just have, their huge Twitter followers. They just have the people behind them. And if they don't make a stand, now making a stand, remember, Hillary Clinton's people were ecstatic when they found out that Bernie was running, because they thought, oh, fantastic, we're going to run against, she'll have competition, but it's going to be slaughter. And then like, what the hell? I mean, what, he's leading in Iowa, going into Iowa? It's like, they were just blindsided, because the conventional wisdom back in 2014, we like Bernie Sanders, we like this, we like that, it's not going to happen until he takes a stand, and then it starts happening. And I think that I disagree, because I think that the thing that closes down on us, if we have Republican leadership and Republican and a smart Trump in 2024, which people have been saying, Trump is kind of an aberration. Even I'm sure most of the Republican leadership is relieved that to see him gone, and they're happy to let the Democrats do their dirty work for them. They just want, because they want to just, stay mute, or just mute rather, because they don't want to piss off the base that's been riled up by the Tea Party before and things like that. So I think right now, again, when I'm hearing you, I'm hearing kind of self-reinforcing, like, yeah, what's the logical thing we can expect based on what has happened before, what's going to happen with this vote? I think things will change, and I think leadership and it will among the squad, and I think Cori Bush, when you've had her experiences, you're not so impressed by the hand-wringing of a lot of people who have been in the system for a long time. I said, I can show you real problems, that kind of thing. So I think this will be, I don't believe what you say will be true. I think just having the vote, and in Democratic and activist circles, it being a rallying point, you'd be surprised how people can change their minds, because something is happening at all. Now, if nothing happens, then if the Democrats do incremental nonsense, which is actually backsliding, and nothing happens for most of the people, we are going to see a rout in 2022 and 2024. And then it will really be hard to climb out of that pit. Or maybe not. Maybe the Democrats will finally be defeated and the activists will take over. I could be wrong too, but...
Yeah, so I think it is very likely. I agree with you and disagree with your comfortable tenured friends. I don't have any of those, by the way. I've never had anything remotely close to a tenure track job, so I don't meet those people, but generally. But in any case, I think that you're right, and your tenured academic friends are wrong. That it is very likely that that there will be a rout in 2022, and quite probably. 2024, certainly at least 2022, that the Democrats will continue to lose seats, because nothing's going to change, and that usually happens anyway in the first midterm, and I think there's certainly a good chance of it then. Does that make it less likely that we're going to have Medicare for all? Well, I don't think so. I think that it makes it like. I think that itself is neutral, because I think replacing a Democrat who's against Medicare for all with a Republican who's against Medicare for all, is kind of a step sideways as far as the chances.
That might be. And the thing is that, and that makes my point, is that...
Okay, well, let's talk about that, because if that's a step sideways as far as go for Medicare for all, right? What would a step forward be, right? And I think that what you need to do, the bottom line thing that bothers me about this, that takes it from just being like, I don't think that this particular like proposed parliamentary tactic makes sense. I think it would be counterproductive. I think it would make the underlying problem of people not taking it seriously worse, and provide more cover in the future to Democrats who are against it, say, hey, look, sure, why are you giving me grief about this thing that only got 1 out of the 4 votes in the House? I'm talking about real things that could really happen, like, whatever half-baked public option bullshit, that they come up with. But I think that what actually would change it, the fundamental reason that we don't have Medicare for all certainly isn't, I mean, sure, you could say that, AOC, the squad, these people, that lots of mistakes, lots of things they're doing one way that it'd be better if they did it the other way. But fundamentally, the reason that we're not going to have Medicare for all in the next congressional session is not because of anything one way or the other that they're doing or not doing. It's because only 118 people in the House even pretend to be for Medicare for all. Everybody else is openly against it. And so if, the reason what you need to do to get Medicare for all would be to win a whole ton of primaries against centrists and also build up enough of a grassroots movement that's powerful enough that you could actually pressure fence sitters. And I don't think that we're anywhere near close to having either of those things right now. You're talking about how in 2016, the Hillary people didn't take, Bernie Sanders, that seriously. They didn't think it was going to go anywhere. But let's also, fair enough, but let's also not talk about this as if Bernie Sanders won or anything like that. I mean, at the beginning of this year, it was the opposite problem, right? After Iowa, especially, that everybody's, centrists, everybody thought that Bernie Sanders was going to win the nomination. The big debate that was happening was if, as seemed quite likely, he was going to show up to the convention with a plurality, but not a majority of delegates, then would it be okay to nominate somebody else on the second round anyway? And that didn't happen. And why didn't it happen? Well, it's not because people preferred Biden's policies to Bernie's. They didn't. The polling evidence is pretty clear there. It didn't happen because people didn't take seriously enough the idea that Bernie was going to be able to do any of that stuff for that to be a decisive thing to get them to vote for him. There were these other things that seemed like good reasons to vote for Biden. Not to me, obviously, I campaigned for Bernie, but to them, that seemed like good reasons. Well, he'd be a stronger candidate against Trump. That's the most important thing, that we get rid of him. Because when you don't think that this other stuff is going to happen anyway, no matter how much you would like it to happen, if you thought it was going to happen, you're going to vote based on different things. And final point about this, before I throw back to you, that if you're going to compare, okay, Bernie ultimately lost both times, but did better than anybody expected him to do. Well, why did he do better than anybody expected him to do? Because it turned out that, that there was a lot more support out in the general public, for what he was talking about than anybody thought that he would. But when it comes to force the vote, then it seems like, okay, well, the one thing I think we could probably agree that we do know is that centrist Democrats are not going to have road to Damascus moments on this. They are going to continue to serve the corporate interests that they've always served. So we know in advance in this case that it's not like, oh, maybe there's this big reservoir of support in Congress. There's not. That means that we're talking about a 3-1 defeat with no suspense to make it seem more distant than ever. And so I'm all for being confrontational. If you want to say, AOC and the rest, are too conciliatory towards Pelosi, they shouldn't be. I agree with that. I have no problem with political theater. But this particular bit of theater seems really poorly thought out to me, and seems really counterproductive because the message that it sends is the opposite of the one that we wanted to send. The message it sends is, hey, this thing that the left is talking about is never going to happen. And so because it seems really poorly thought out to me, it seems like a particularly bad thing to do this, pressure campaign that's all about, getting people mad at, delegitimizing, calling a sellout every day, right? Which the main initiator of this does, so people won't support them in the future. The people who we want a whole ton more of in Congress, because the only way we're ever going to get Medicare for all is if we elect a whole lot more of them.
Well, okay, I should have been writing a lot of stuff down, but I'm going to take a point by point. First of all, you're right. We have to primary a lot of people. what better way to launch the 2022 campaigns? And I can tell you right now, the local one is already being launched.
Good.
And I'm going to talk more about that on Feldman, but what better way than to use a very public forum? Okay, what you've been talking about are kerfluffles on the Twitters and the Facebook, and the vast majority of people don't give a rat's ass about that. I'm seeing a very public, I'm seeing the debate and the vote on Medicare for all, because it's critical that we also have the debate, that Nancy Pelosi doesn't do these like stupid rules that just have a vote and absolutely no floor time. It's the floor time. And who do you think are going to be the most compelling speakers when it comes to Medicare for all vote? Who are going to be the most compelling speakers on the House floor? That's going to be the people who are for Medicare for all and passionately for Medicare for all. And if you get Rashida Tlaib and now Cori Bush and Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar is now totally behind, force the vote. You're going to see, and that's going to be broadcast to millions of people because they have millions of followers. And you're going to see, like, you'll have faces and you'll have arguments and you'll see the debate and you'll see how lame the people are who are against Medicare for all. Believe Nancy Pelosi does not want this debate, does not want this vote. Now, if she thought that this was going to end the Medicare for all debate and end this, any threat that it might actually be forced to be pushed forward, she'd be welcoming it. I think she's afraid that in this particular cycle where people are calling and screaming at their legislatures to frickin' do something at all for us, she's afraid that this might pass. And she might be afraid that it might pass for nefarious reasons if Republicans try to F with this, but it might blow up in their faces too, like trick cigars. Oh, I thought you were for this. I don't see, I think the arguments, I think there's a lot of personal animosity to the person who is like starting this kerfuffle on the Twitters and the Facebook, but I don't think most people give a rat's ass about that. I think that the fundamental problem here is that people still do extrapolations and calculations as if politics are static. If anything at all, I think part of the reason why Bernie Sanders became so popular is that people couldn't even believe that a major candidate for office is on a debate stage saying the stuff he's saying. They go, did he just say that? Is that okay to say? Because oftentimes people need permissions. I mean, when you run campaigns, signs are important. People think, well, signs don't vote, people do. I said, yeah, but people see enough signs for somebody they thought was a long shot, and it just works like, oh, it's like giving them permission to even think about it. So I think that whether or not it gets shot down, that is a perfect launch pad. The Medicare for all debate, more importantly than the vote, although the vote is important, because then we find out if the Democrats get those 2 seats in the Senate, in Georgia, then we're going to find out who the enemy is. And he is us, because there won't be Mitch McConnell to blame anything on. We peel back a layer. So one way or the other, and of course, if Mitch McConnell prevails, then he's the enemy, and then you can use this debate, which, as I said, I think, and I may be wrong too, but I think that the debates and the arguments, not just on the floor of the House, but people being surrogates and leaders of nurses unions and doctors and activists, this will be the trigger point. And yeah, this will be this might be several election cycles, which is the other thing that I have an issue with the left about, is that everybody's thinking about the next election, which is always the most important one of our lifetimes. So we have to put our emotions aside. The right didn't do that. After it looked like the right culturally was soundly defeated. I'm older than you, so I remember waking up to a universe where Ronald Reagan was the president. And as devastated as everybody felt, when old Trumpy managed to squeak through, I said, I was a young person traumatized thinking this planet had 2 years left before thermonuclear warfare, and that's it. or any number of dystopic science fiction novel storylines take place. I mean, I was physically sick, I was mentally depressed, and that never left. But life goes on, but the Republicans never accepted defeat. They did not see one election cycle as the end all and be all. They had, at least their leaders had a trajectory. And, hey, persistence matters. So again, if I would just reiterate, it's like, this is not the end. The vote on Medicare for all isn't the end of it. It is the beginning of the fight. And it's the only, and this is the one time we have leverage within the Democratic Party. If this opportunity closes, then we go back, then we watch the Democrats just, lose, and we will be told, and everybody will be just beat down and terrified once again that we can't ask for anything at all because the Republicans, and they'll lose anyway. My little snapshot of the situation.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
So, could you turn your volume down a little bit?
Volume?
Yeah.
Okay. I can barely hear you now, but.
Okay. Sorry about that. Here, I'll try to be loud and see if that works. So maybe you can turn it up a little. I don't know. We weren't getting it earlier. We were just getting it for a second. I don't know what happened there. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, look, I think that this idea that that Nancy Pelosi, that sure, if she thought that this was going to be bad for her, and I don't think we should be too dramatic. I don't think it's going to kill anything. I think honestly, I think it's very low stakes either way. But I think that but that if she thought that it was going to be bad, for the movement for Medicare for all, that that she'd do it, and she isn't doing it. She doesn't want to do it, and so. Actually, if you want to, that's a good point somebody made in the chat. If you want to turn the volume up so you can hear me better, if you just mute yourself until you're ready to talk again, that should solve the problem. Okay. But in any case, this idea that Nancy Pelosi, if it was going to be, bad for Medicare for all, she would allow it. She isn't allowing it, so she must know that it would actually be good for Medicare for all if it happened. I think that this is an assumption that we make on the left all the time that doesn't really make sense to me. That our political enemies, must all be, tactical or strategic geniuses. So, whatever they're doing to counter us must be the most there thing that they could do to counter us. And if doing the opposite would actually be more effective, they would be doing that. And I don't think any of that's true. I think that they are just they're just blundering around, reacting to things the way that everybody else is. I think sometimes, hey, this is something that the left wants. Well, hell, I'll deny it to them. Cute cat. This idea that I think some people have that, they're winning, they're defeating us, so they must be really good at this, whatever they're doing must make sense. I think really, and this goes back to whether mission is accomplished on the activism or not, I think really underestimates how weak we are and how easy it is to defeat us. That right now, the left is extremely weak. It's extremely scattered for the most part. What we're talking about is what could be the beginning of something, but for the most part, we're talking about media. We're talking about some activist organizations, but very little that has a solid base in the working class. That the kind of thing that successful social democratic and socialist movements around the world have had. We're living in a country, and this, by the way, would be my response to what somebody in the chat said about a general strike with 6.2% private sector unionization. So the labor movement has almost ceased to exist. What little is left is in a deep defensive crouch. And so I think that under those circumstances, it's pretty easy to defeat us. I think the effect of decades of neoliberalism, where people just don't take seriously that this stuff could happen. I don't think anybody has to be Sun Tzu or Clausewitz to beat us, especially with massive institutional backing, especially with the backing of all of corporate America. So I think that assumption is just wrong as far as a floor vote goes. And debate before a floor vote. I think that if it did happen, if in the next, however long we have left, 36 hours or whatever it would have to be, if AOC and enough others had a change of heart at the last minute. I hadn't heard that about Ilhan Omar. A little quick Googling, wasn't finding that either, but fair enough. So that's one. But if all of that happened, and let's say for the sake of argument that Pelosi wouldn't just do what I'm actually 100% certain she would do, which is if 10 Democrats aren't going to vote for her, she would find 10 Republicans to make some unspeakably evil deal with, because that's
I'd love to watch that.
That's the kind of thing that Pelosi would do. But if that didn't happen, right? If she said, "Okay, I am going to make this deal with you that we're going to have this floor vote," I think that there would be maybe 15 minutes of debate. I'm sure that this right now, the drama about the leadership vote, would get a fair amount of media attention. I'm pretty skeptical that the 15 minutes of floor debate leading to a 3-1 preordained defeat would be something that would have the kind of media impact, that you're saying they would have. But I guess my big thing would just be this, that it's not either the end or the beginning of anything. I think it would be a little bit of a setback. You think it'd be a little bit forward, but I think that what would that the beginning, has already happened. And this is the thing that frustrates me the most about this, that, people talk about it as if it's a difference between doing something and doing nothing. I don't think that the Jimmy Dore issue, by the way, should be dismissed as just what's going on Facebook or Twitter's. We're talking about somebody with a massive megaphone, who, as you point out, was the main person initiating this whole idea. It is still its most visible face. And the way that he's presented that face.
I initiated that idea.
Okay, all right. Well, most people don't know that. So because we live in an unjust world, instead of thinking that it's Mary Anne Cummings' idea, people think that it's Jimmy Dore's. And actually, I would love to live in a world where as many people knew who you were as who knew who Jimmy Dore was. I think we'd have a much smarter, more interesting version of this discussion if that happened. But that the person who is the credited initiator and the main public face of it is constantly talking about how these people are sellouts, that there's no reason to support them if they don't buy into this particular idea for a symbolic tactic at this particular time, which I think is a really counterproductive message, because I'm not thinking about the next election or making some dramatic claim about how the next election is the most important election ever or anything like that. I think it's a process, as you said, over a bunch of election cycles of recruiting primary challengers in cases where centrist Democrats are vulnerable to that, of building up grassroots pressure for actual fence sitters, and I think that long-term process, we're already starting from a very weak position. We've got 1 out of 4 congressmen even saying that they support this. I suspect that some of those people, if they thought there was actually a chance of it passing, I'm sure all of them would vote for it if the floor vote happened now, because they'd have nothing to lose, because they know that it had no chance of passing. But then I think that if they did think it had a chance of passing, I'm sure some of those people are very soft yes votes, wouldn't vote yes. So it's a start, it's something. But I think that sending the message that the most hardcore Medicare for All supporters in Congress don't really support it, and there's no reason for people who care about them to support them in the future because they're sellouts, because they're not going along with the symbolic stunt, I think is an incredibly counterproductive message. And I think that framing this as doing something or doing nothing, we disagree about whether it's mission accomplished, but I think really underestimates all the activism you're talking about earlier. I think that the something that's really a something, that's not a pressure campaign that's mostly screaming about sellouts on YouTube, but that's really something is like what the National Nurses United has been doing for the last several years. Not supporting this, by the way, but they have in organizing canvassing, supporting candidates, going door to door, doing all this stuff to promote Medicare for all. What DSA working groups around the country have been doing to promote Medicare for all. What Justice Democrats does when they recruit people to run in primaries against centrist Democrats who oppose Medicare for all. Those are all things that I think are, yes, long term. And and if the question is, hey, what's the alternative that's going to do something that's going to make Medicare for all more likely to happen in this congressional session, or let's be honest, the next one, the answer is nothing, because nothing would do that. But that doesn't mean giving up. That means recognizing that you're in the middle of a very hard fought, very long campaign. A hell of a lot of progress has already been made, getting to the point where there are 118 co-sponsors, where a candidate who supported it, did as well as Bernie did. But I think to get the majority of the public to take it seriously enough that they would actually punish politicians who vote no against it, I think that there is a hell of a lot more to be done before we can declare mission accomplished. But if you want to respond to any of that, you want to respond to, and then you have the last word after that.
Well, again, going back to what you said, I want to go back to, the whole primary process this time around. The vast majority of the country wasn't involved in those primary decisions. As you know, that primaries, sadly, are only a tiny fraction of the voting population. And it was massive manufacture of consent. I mean, I was in Michigan going door to door for Bernie, and people were fearful. Do you think that he could win? They think that, they were already COVID sheltering, and I was already out wearing a mask. And this was the beginning of March, when I was doing this. So, it's manufacturing consent. We're always going to be up against this. It didn't stop Bernie Sanders from pushing this. Second of all, yes, when I said mission accomplished, I said, I think we've got the majority of people on our side, but it doesn't mean that it's ending. And it doesn't mean that having a floor vote is also ending the activism work. It can be seen as promoting it. I mean, Bernie Sanders' run for office promoted a lot of activism. It started activism where it didn't even exist, because Bernie was the counterexample to all the manufactured consent people being fed for decades on our news media. It's like, he said that? He said that. Part of the reason, and I'm probably going to talk about this, and I'm having John Lash on Feldo's After Hours, is that part of the reason he's running for mayor of Aurora, because, again, the COVID and the Black Lives Matter has given us an opportunity, but says, activists need something to organize around. So it's not like, we're going to be devastated if he doesn't win. I think I'd be devastated if it looked like he could win and he didn't. But, I'll probably win my race again, because I'm running again. And we've got a little slate of us local progressives running. But the point is that you don't, the politics and the real political action and the real mechanics of government and the activism should be brought, I don't think they're completely separate. I think, I know that you disagree, but I think having a floor vote and forcing this is what some people will need to see. Oh my God, they're doing it. They said they weren't going to do it. Or somebody said they were going to do it. They are doing it. I think this could be galvanizing. Again, whatever happens, it's not going to be the end of anything. It's going to be, you get people on the record with a vote. There's one thing about co-sponsoring this. So old Kamala Harris was on the stage. Bernie Sanders generously let her and Warren and anyone else share the stage with him when he announced his Medicare for all, right? And now she turned on a dime because of politics. I'm saying that, a lot of this defeatism can be self-fulfilling if we don't do anything at all. And try, maybe have a debacle, but if you don't try, if you don't take what many people would consider an outrageous stand, which outside here, and by the way, I was at the Force the Vote town hall, and I was listening to all the stories beforehand. And if you listen to those stories and you weren't outraged, and then Jimmy did tell his story with his wife. I heard it one time before, but have an experience like that, and that was before he had his HBO specials and all that, you know, he was bankrupt because of this illness, because of medical issues. And when you listen to the whole arc of these narratives, it's like, how can you have a shred of human decency and any kind of ethic if you're not on some level feeling outraged by this situation we have now? And I think there's enough people out there feeling suddenly being thrown out of the comfortable middle class and seeing firsthand the outrage. If you're young, if you're middle class, you don't see it. You don't experience it firsthand. That's the problem with the Medicare for All, is that most people like their insurance because nobody has actually needed it. And it's when people need their insurance, you know, it's weird. It's kind of like marriage. It's the weird contract where you don't know the terms of it until, like, A, in marriage you have to get out of it, or B, with insurance you actually need it. And then you find out the horrible terms that you've signed up for. And but I think this kind of helps. And I think any show of people having a coherent action on that stage, and that's a national stage, okay? We can't rely on media. I mean, they've shut us out. It's been manufactured consent, got Biden, this brainstem, maybe into the White House. We have to counteract that. And that certainly won't be, and that won't be the only issue. What happens if there is a modicum of success with Medicare for All? What's stopping us from doing any number of things? I think Medicare for All is easy. Most people now understand what that is, but then one of my issues are climate change. Where's that gone? I thought that was an existential issue, right? Well, things aren't existential issues if you're worried about your own, like, income and healthcare, which the COVID fallout is going to toss many people out, many more millions out of the middle class. So that's what I say. And by the way, yes, Jimmy has many following. He's got almost 1 million subscribers on YouTube. I'm one of them, but the vast majority of us, you know, it was kind of like Cenk Uygur, when Cenk Uygur was so popular and he would have those Titanic rants, like against Michael Schur at one time. It's on about, the press covering for the Bush crime family. He had this just rant with Michael Schur there. And yeah, that was kind of impolite and unfair to Mike Schur, but on the other hand, that's what made Cenk and the Young Turks so popular back in the mid-2000s. Because, wow, he isn't sounding like anybody on, NBC or CNN. It was that, I wouldn't say the things that Jimmy did, but I certainly get the passion. I get the outrage.
So I 100% get the outrage. I share the outrage. I've been, I could share my many, many, many frustrations with the healthcare system in the last several years. I've been in I share that outrage. Unfortunately, like I said, I don't think most people do yet. Right. I certainly think we can get him eventually. But I do totally agree. I'll just end with this point of agreement. I do totally agree that the outrage is entirely justified. You might disagree about whether it's being channeled in a useful direction in this case or not. But in any case, I certainly hope that you win that race. Is there a website or something I could direct people to for that?
Yeah, it's my old website that hasn't turned over, but MaryAnneCummings.com / Fox Valley Park District. That's FVPD. So I'm supposed to get my new website up fairly soon. It was supposed to be up already, but
Okay, fair enough.
MaryAnneCummings.com, then you can navigate your way to it.
Let's just make sure I've got that here. No. Okay. Well, in any case, that's I messed that up somehow, but here's the here is the basic thing. That's share. So here we go. Fox Valley Parks Department. So please please do if there's anything you can do to support Mary Anne's run and anyone else around the country who supports the things that she and I do. I always want to.
And I urge people, by the way, run for local public office. You have no idea how powerful you can be. I mean, really, nobody thinks to run for Park District Board. Well, school board, if you want, if you want a little repo man kind of tension in your life, run for school board. But if the library boards, water boards, I mean, you have as much power as you want on those low level positions. So,
all right. Thanks for coming on, Mary Anne.
Okay. Thanks so much, Ben.
Bye.